So this morning, Anthony, we are doing the old pivot, the old fake left and move right, the old spin reverse. I'm using football analogies. This is a sport that is played in the United States.
Okay.
So we were supposed to be doing an event this morning here at Denver Startup Week with thousands of people here in the audience. That was about accounting.
Yes.
But unfortunately, our guest today,
Richard had a family emergency that he had to bow out on. So
wishing Richard the very best.
We had two tragedies. We had Richard not being able to show up, and you lost your coffee. So
it was a big tragedy, but you guys don't panic. We're okay.
Oh, no. It's your professionalism that I respect.
Well done. So we're going to do a little pivot. We're going to do a different topic this morning, but I think it's still going to be equally interesting, and I think it'll be fun. And we have a studio audience, so you guys feel free to jump in and ask questions along the way. So I'm going to start with a story. In 2010, a young woman launched a fashion startup out of her apartment. What started as a passion project quickly turned into a fast-growing business. But as her company expanded, the risks multiplied, and so did the fear. Competitors entered the market, supply chain issues piled up, and the stress of keeping her business afloat began to take a toll. She found herself constantly questioning her decisions, losing sleep over whether her company would survive to the next quarter. That founder was Katrina Lake, the CEO of Stitch Fix. In the early days, Lake faced overwhelming uncertainty, but she learned to manage the stress and risk by staying focused on her vision. Rather than letting fear paralyze her, she embraced data-driven decisions and focused on solving problems one at a time. Her ability to navigate the anxiety and pressures helped Stitch Fix grow into a publicly traded company with millions of customers, including me. Pretty sure these jeans are Stitch Fix. I'll make them look good. That's just what I'm saying. Today, we'll be discussing navigating fear and risk and how do you manage the inevitable stress and anxiety that comes with running a company. What tools can founders use to turn fear into motivation? All that and a long diatribe about how good I look in these jeans on today's How to Founder.
I'm supposed to play the bumper right now, but I can't get past the fact that you think that I'm going to let you get away with not commenting on your dad bod. We'll see in a second.
This is pretty.
All right, Chris. And might I say, your head is particularly shiny this morning.
Thank you, thank you.
I think the lighting is perfect.
I applied a fresh coat of varnish this morning to make sure it was a particular shade of shiny.
I can't get the visual of you applying varnish to your
Varnish.
forehead.
I use a paintbrush. That's what happens. My name is Chris Franks.
I'm Anthony Franco, and How to Founder is a podcast for you, the founder, where we teach you tips, tricks, and details that MBA professors and those evil college professors like Chris refuse to teach you.
And we're live today from CU Denver Business School. Welcome.
Sorry,
this is an incredible
should not have disparaged college professors in a college.
I think you can.
Okay.
I think it's actually required here at CU Denver Business School. And we're here in the Jake Jabs event space. Here at CU Denver, there's the Jabs Center for Entrepreneurship, and teaches some pretty darn good classes, actually, on entrepreneurship, if I do say so myself. But I'm also a biased person, because I do work for CU. Anthony, great conversation today, and an interesting one, because it is probably the most ubiquitous thing that a founder sits with day in, day out is fear. And it's something that for years I sat with and didn't name. I didn't say, this is fucking scary. Like, this is a scary thing to do. And failure is your companion on this journey. And I didn't want to fail.
Yeah.
Fear truly is a co-pilot if you're going to be in this founder's journey, unless you're a psychopath like you. But that's fine.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't.
You have no fear?
Yeah.
You have no feelings, really. There's no.
I have one.
Well, you've already lost.
Don't hurt my
So
feelings.
tell me about just before, as we get started here. Tell me about what is your belief around fear in entrepreneurship in being a founder. What does it mean to sit with fear as a founder?
Well, it is part and parcel. So actually, I have kind of a story that I like to tell about fear and why I personally. People ask me, why are you an entrepreneur? And I recall this story that Johnny Carson told. For most of you, you don't know who Johnny Carson is, but he was
Johnny Carson
used to be Jimmy
was
Fallon.
a late 19.
He was the former Jimmy Fallon.
I'm kidding. You guys are just younger than we are.
And he was talking about a reporter that he saw going through World War II vets, paratroopers. And the reporter came to the first paratrooper and he said, why are you a paratrooper? Do you like it? And he's like, I love it. Like macho,
Super aggro,
fully alpha male, saying, I love it. It's the best. Adrenaline rush. Blah blah blah. Just second guy. Why do you like being a paratrooper? Same exact answer. Thumping his chest, talking about the adrenaline, talking about getting in touch with his fear and just overcoming it. Third guy, same thing. Fourth guy, same thing. Fifth guy, why do you like being a paratrooper? And the guy says, I hate it. I do not like being a paratrooper. It's the scariest thing I've ever been a part of. And the reporter was a little weirded out by it, but being a paratrooper is a volunteer thing. It's like, yeah. He says, you volunteered to jump out of planes. Yeah. And you're scared to death of it. Yeah. Why? Why did you volunteer to be a paratrooper? He says, I just like hanging around guys that like jumping out of planes. And that's kind of what entrepreneurship is for me. I just like hanging around guys and gals that like jumping out of planes.
God, I want to make the obvious joke, but I'm not going to make it. So you're suggesting that your journey in sitting with fear is that it is terrifying, and you're embracing that, and you understand that it's terrifying, but you enjoy being around the people that at least pretend to not be afraid. Is that sort of?
Well, it's not about. I mean, bravery isn't doing something without fear, right? Bravery is doing something even though you have fear. So I like being around people that are brave through the fear, for sure.
I think it's fair, and I do think that one of the truest things that you'll find about sitting with a room full of founders, the hundreds of founders that are here today. Thank you. Is that there is an element of courage, and there's an element of knowing that you're going to go try to do something that 80% of people fail. Now, maybe that makes you all crazy, which would also not be inaccurate for most founders. But also there's this element that you do need to have some sense of breaking away from a pack and breaking away from a normal trajectory of a job and a safe job and more of a safe life, right? A steady paycheck. Have you guys heard the term 401k? I've heard of it, but I don't really know what it is. It's like it's something. So there's an element of you need to be brave to do this work. And I don't think that a founder would say that they were brave. I don't think that they would self-identify as like, hey, I'm overcoming fear. But I do think it's true. I think every founder that I've ever met has some sort of sense of bravery, some sort of
delusion.
Or delusion,
Yeah.
right.
Or both.
Yeah, and that gets back into the psychopath range, which is
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think delusion is a big part of it, but I think the thing that is the most scary about entrepreneurship is the notion, like, am I delusional? Like, is my idea delusional? Am I the guy that people make fun of on Shark Tank? Or right?
Yeah.
So am I playing into the trope of being the idea person that goes nowhere, the wantrepreneur?
By the way, if you guys haven't, just go on your phones right now, look up Sticky Note Guy Shark Tank. We can all make fun of them together. It'll be great. there's an element for every startup, for every entrepreneur, for every founder, where you are breaking away, where you are going to be doing something unique and novel. By definition, so we as society don't like that, right? We try to kind of pull people back. Like, what? Oh, you're going to fail. Oh, why would you do that? I'm thinking about, so I had a...
Everybody else's, so if you have a fear of heights and you see somebody on the ledge,
Yeah.
you feel
Oh, I
it,
get, yeah.
right? The same thing is true with the people around you when you're about to go into entrepreneurship, don't you think?
I think you're probably right. So I used to have this thing called a job a long time ago, and in that job, I actually had a savings account. It was really fun. But the moment I started telling people, it's like, hey, look, I don't think this path is for me. I think I'm going to go on this other journey. I'm going to start my own company. It was palpable, the sense of people being like, you sure you want to do that? These are people I thought were my friends. People who supported, like, we drink happy hour and bitch about bosses and do all this sort of stuff that you do with the job, right? The moment I was like, hey, I'm going to go do this other thing, it almost felt like people closed ranks behind me and were like, and I'm not sure why, but I do think that they were a little bit, maybe they were afraid for me, but I do think that there was bravery in the sense of having to go and like strike out in the world and try to do your own thing. I think it does require a sense of dealing with your own fear.
Dealing with your own fear, but I mean, to kind of take a different tack on that, have you ever met? I've met entrepreneurs that went into it without fear. Without like they were like, I'm gonna supreme confidence that they're going to.
Do you believe that it's possible to do this job well without an element of fear?
Not
thumbs
at
up
all.
Or thumbs down? Do you guys think? What do you think? Do you think it's possible to do
without any fear?
Yeah.
Yeah.
To do the job well, you do think so? I think. Why do you think? Is just because if you have a sense of confidence, you think thumbs down? All right. Just because. By the way, the person honking agrees with me. They were agreeing with me.
Yeah, I think fear is an incredibly powerful, positive motivator to not screw things up. If you're not afraid, just be candid. I'm worried for you if you're not afraid.
Well, I think that to not call it like so. I
Fear.
think that there's a
fear might
there's
be a wrong
different
word.
forms of motivation. I think there's different forms of fear too. All right, so let's change gears. So I think that the first point that we've got to is that most of us believe that there is a level where fear is a companion with you on this journey.
Yeah.
Now, it can be good because it can be motivating. It can be bad because it can be crippling.
Debilitating.
It can put you into a bad state. But let's talk about how to deal with that as a founder, because at the heart of every founder's fear is what, Anthony? Like, what do you think is underlying the fact that you're probably going to have fear?
I hear the term imposter syndrome thrown around all the time. I think that underscores really what the fear is, and that is having really bad background noises during a podcast.
I mean,
no.
It's very funny because you want to talk about sympathetic fear. My dog is terrified of trash trucks. And so when she hears beeping, she runs and hides. And now I have like a sympathetic reaction of fear for my dog. I'm like, oh my God.
So anyway, the imposter syndrome fundamentally comes down to the fear of failing, and not just the fear of failing, but what failure means to you, to your loved ones, to your reputation. I think the fear of failure is the fundamental fear.
So, but to your point earlier, so like if you peel that back even one layer and you dive even deeper into that thing.
Yep.
So part of the narrative about being a founder is that you will fail. Everybody fails. It's part of the journey. You're going to fail small, you're going to fail big, and that's okay because if we do it right, every one of those failures turns into a key learning and you can build a business off of that, right?
Yep.
So, but there's something deeper. So like if we just read the Lean Startup and go like, okay, fail fast. it still sucks to fail. It still hurts. Why? What is that underlying factor where we know that failure is part of the journey? We know that learning, failure is the ground of learning. But yet still, when we fail in something clear and obvious, it's a fucking terrible day. For me, at least. Maybe it's your one feeling, is not.
Yeah, I don't have the feel. So failure. I just guess I failed so much that I'm numb to it.
That's one way to do it. Exposure therapy, right?
Yeah, it's exposure therapy.
Matthias, like exposure therapy. That's what it is.
So I feel the capital F failure, not the lowercase f failure.
Explain.
Failure of my business. That's what I care about. Failures in my business, I don't.
So, okay, let's take the big capital F. Is that the failure of your business?
The big F.
So let's take that. Why is it scary? Why is it scary to stare that down when we know we started this journey? We're saying that 80% of startups fail, 80% of companies fail. Why is it scary? Because at the end of the day, the odds are you're going to fail.
Because I believe because I don't want to accept the ego hit that I was wrong, that I'm going to be better than 10 other people that was going to try it.
Right.
It's an ego hit, right? It's a self-belief that was proven wrong.
So, would you guys agree at the heart of this is probably some sorts of ego, right? Like I think you're right. I think it's our belief that my mom told me I was special, and that I was one of those 2 out of 10 people that could be successful. And so deep down I believe that I'm somebody that can defy the odds. I believe that I
think your mom she said you're special.
Oh, special.
I think that's
Got
what the
it.
word. Yeah.
No, I think you're right. She's like, yeah, she's special. I had this haircut when I was 4. So
That's not true. You had a mullet.
Yeah. Man, if I could ever dig out the picture of my mullet. Oh, God, I was rocking that thing about 1982. It's great. So, but we believe that we are special. We still, even though I could tell you it's the worst thing in the world to attach your ego to your business. And I say that when your business fails, do not let your ego go with it. Do not let your emotions. Do not be like me and truly have terrible mental health episodes when my business failed. It's really hard to do that. We end up tying our ego into our business in some sort of profound
I've heard
way.
you talk about this, not attaching your ego to your business before. It doesn't land with me.
So you think you have to attach your business or your ego to be successful?
I mean, not your entire identity, but certainly a big part of your ego. Yeah, I think you do. I think you have a responsibility to the business and to the people that choose to work for you to know that you're working on something that is bigger, that you attach yourself to.
So what you're saying though is that you can't really have drive without ego and failure associated with it.
Yeah.
You guys agree or disagree with that? Agree. You agree? You think you have to have
ego and fear
to have drive? Fuck, I think you guys are right. That's hard though. It's like I want to believe that I'm ambitious
in
without
20
fear.
episodes, that's 3 for me.
That you've been right?
Yeah, that's 3. Thank you, Chris.
Dang it. So if this is like this is another thing for old people. This is like a Gordon Gekko moment, which is greed is good. So we're suggesting here that fear, for lack of a better word, is good for founders to have because that's what creates the drive, passion, energy, etc.
I'm curious. You said fear is not a driver. What drives you if it's not fear? But motivation is the same. For me, it's the same word as drive. Like motivation and drive is the same thing. So what is the motivation
behind it?
Behind it. Like what motivates you if it's not fear? What is the...
Yeah, so like that's what I think. I think that there's a counter.
So he answered to change my life in a positive way.
Yeah, but there's a place where you can go and say, hey, look, I want to be this thing. I want to achieve this thing, and I think it can come from positive emotions too. I do agree that it's probably both things can be true. I think it's both both, things. Yeah, go.
You have to be careful with fear though too, because it can paralyze you.
Yeah, you have to be
So
careful
you
about
just,
fear
like,
because it
you
can
set
paralyze you.
tracks and be like, I'm not going to even try that because it's just too much.
Yeah. So the statement was you have to be careful with fear because fear can be paralyzing at times. I agree. Yes.
I think it's self-actualization.
Explain.
So the comment was, sorry, we're streaming live, so I want to make sure the folks on.
There's at least
There's 45 people that said they're going to be on the podcast today. I don't know how many are.
Yeah.
So it's more about self-actualization. Expand on that.
Yeah, so self-actualization is the fulfillment of one's own potential. And when you self-actualize, you keep your ego whole. And fearness around it to keep the drive, to keep you holding all of this intact. So I think I can do this thing. I do this thing, that's self-actualization. That holds my ego intact. But fear is like a primal thing that keeps us pulling ourselves together.
So I'll restate it in the thing. So self-actualization is the act of achieving one's potential. But you can keep your ego intact along that journey of trying to achieve your potential. So that's your, I'm assuming that's kind of the self-belief, right? Like my self-belief that I've got this potential, I want to try to do that.
There's something about that primal
But
fear.
fear is sort of the surrounding force that keeps that together. Interesting point. Yeah, I like it. So I think that we've probably landed on a place where fear is omnipresent. It's maybe a good thing, maybe a bad thing, depending on your perspective. But it is going to be part of your life if you choose to go down this path. Is that a fair, we've gotten to that
For
place?
most.
Okay, for most of us.
For
right.
most, yeah.
So the question then becomes, we as founders, how do we deal with that fear? How do we not let it paralyze us? How do we make sure that it is a force for good in our life? Because I do think that there is that sense of drive and motivation. And not get spiraled to poor mental health, which is I think that's the dark side, and I think it's the thing that we have to name. Fear can be overwhelming, and when fear becomes overwhelming, it can turn into terrible places of mental health, depression, anxiety, all those things, and that's the other thing we haven't named. When fear is persistent, it becomes anxiety. And so let's talk about the tactics then. And what are your ideas, Anthony, to say how do you, on a day in, day out basis, deal with that pressure and fear that sits beside you?
Well, let me ask you a question. Is pain something you enjoy?
No, it's a setup because I also in doing endurance athletics.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I
what you know about working out is there's pain involved.
Yeah.
If you went into a gym expecting there would be no pain, wouldn't the pain be worse?
100%.
So if you go into entrepreneurship expecting there would be no fear, it'll be worse. So I think the first step in overcoming fear and getting through fear is to accept it's part of the journey.
Just name it.
Just name it and go, okay, how am I going to deal? And then, so the first thing is recognize that there's an issue.
Yeah.
And then from there you can start to deal with it. Certainly, we've talked about the other things that you can deal with stress and anxiety and fear as an entrepreneur, right? So exercise one, mental health is checking in with mental health, checking out, being able to check out of work, breaking down the things you're afraid of, writing lists is the thing that I usually do. I'll take something that I'm have a lot of anxiety over, and I'll break it down into smaller steps and making lists. So.
I think that this is important. So I think one thing is, if we're saying fear is omnipresent, cultivating positive mental health, and we have talked about it a bunch, but at the same time, cultivating positive mental health is not something we should talk about once. We should talk about all the fucking time, because it does, there is the numbers that we heard yesterday from Mick is, Jesus, that guy was idiots. So the stats that he brought off the top of his head were incredible. But
and everybody's listening right now. Give me a stat.
Yeah, but entrepreneurs are way more likely to suffer from depression and anxiety. They're way more likely to have drug and alcohol abuse. They're way more likely to separate from a spouse or a long-term partner. they're way more likely to have suicidal thoughts. So it's like, let's not pretend that's not real, because that's real. That exists, and that is like, there's plenty of data now that shows this. So cultivating positive mental health is on one side of this. The second piece of this is, you said, let's start to break down that fear and make a list and write it down. Tell me about that, because that is I think, a very powerful tool here.
Yeah, so I just think, so when you're feeling that anxiety, you're feeling the fear, it's because there's something in front of you that is uncertain. For me, I shouldn't say you, me. For me, I feel fear when there's something in front of me that is looming that I'm uncertain about. And so the tactic I use after I procrastinate for a very long time is to write down, all right, here are the 6 things that I need to do to try to mitigate that risk. 9 times out of 10, I've overthought it, which is fine. 1 time out of 10, I've underthought it, which is the really scary part.
I think that, have you guys ever done an exercise of just writing down the things that scare you? Like, so I've heard of this, and I think it's used in therapy sometimes. So people that have severe anxiety, they just ask you to come in and be like, hey, just write down the things. And by giving this unspoken emotion individual components and names, it helps you take power away from those individual things. And again, I'm not suggesting that I'm not a mental health practitioner, but I do think that that's super powerful. So for me, classic fucking insomniac. I haven't slept for, 25 years, right? So
Sleep helps, Chris.
sleep does help. But in the moment, when I can't sleep, it's typically because something's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's going on, just starting to be like, let's break that apart and figure out what those components are. Yeah.
Certainly a good strategy that I use for dealing with stuff that's overwhelming me.
Yeah.
Putting it down on paper.
Putting it in paper and starting just to list it. One of the things, like I always say, that shame gremlins can't survive the light. Like, it's the Brene Brown quote that says, if you create the perfect place for shame, it's isolation, loneliness. I'm going to get that quote wrong. Where basically you don't share these things and you don't ask for help, right? So those things, I think it's the same thing for fear. The moment that you say out loud, hey, Anthony, this is fucking scary. I don't know whether or not my company's going to make it. It diffuses power. Hey, we're going through a really tough sales cycle right now, and we're very low on cash, and it's scary. There's not another founder in the room. It's like, we've all been there, right? All of us have. Like, oh,
Yeah.
man, that's tough.
Am I going to make payroll next month?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
scary, and it's real. But by giving it a name and saying it out loud, I think helps a lot. All right, other ideas. How do you help deal with fear in your lives? Like, particularly as it comes to startup. What are other tactics you could suggest? I know you.
Distract myself.
Distraction?
Distract myself with something else.
Okay, distraction. Explain, like, what's an example of distraction?
If I'm worried about getting something done, then I can either switch tasks or just start doing it and stop thinking about the fear of doing it.
There is a funny, weird thing, which is like, I always feel like the common wisdom is to just go face it. Like, let's fucking go. Like, look at that fear in the eyes and stare it down. But the reality is that sometimes when there's a lot of anxiety doing, like, going for a walk is the best idea. Like, not dealing with it. Not diving in and being like, hey, let's get all the work done. I
think that's really interesting because I unconsciously kind of do that. So if I'm in front of my computer and working on something that is very anxiety, and it drives a lot of anxiety, I'll get up and go to my garage and work on something.
There's something that'll calm me down.
Yeah, working with my hands
Yeah.
or whatever. Yeah.
I think also ignorance can fuel fear.
Ooh, interesting. Tell me. Ignorance can fuel fear is the hypothesis.
Yeah, so like, if I'm fearful of something that I know I have to face, but I don't know very much about that topic, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna lean into educating myself on that topic. I'll dig into
what are the podcast signs?
Yeah.
What are the books? What are the articles? And as I start combined with like a walk around the park, right?
Yeah.
So I put the headphones on, grab the dog, and listen or read. The more the education flows in, the fear starts to come down slowly because I feel empowered by what I'm learning.
I think it's a very good point. So I'll summarize just for the
It's a great point.
17,000 people listening. Is education and teaching yourself is a way to just start to diffuse that by reading blogs, podcasts, books, things like that. And the idea I think behind it is fear a lot of times comes from this sense of the unknown. And by actually learning about the thing, you're like, okay, it's not nearly as scary as I thought it was. And the facts are this. It's not directly startup related, but let's say that you guys remember the thing called the global pandemic? I don't remember. But one of the things that was so scary about the pandemic is nobody knew anything about it. And so one of the really valuable things that doctors would do was just to say, okay, here's what we know. And it started to diffuse kind of our national fear around this sense of like, okay, we know what this thing is, we know, and then here's what we're trying to do about it. So,
Well, fear
I'll
is.
just add one quick thing.
please,
As I get educated on something, it raises my confidence.
yeah,
And I start to tell myself a different story, like, oh, these other people did this. It's doable. They just had to learn, failed, learn, and I can do it too.
so learning levels up your confidence. So when you go learn about something, and also being able to see other people, like, look, this person solved this problem, and is now teaching about it. So it's like, it's got to be doable. It's not an impossible task. I like that. It's really important.
Fear fundamentally comes down. The reason why we have fear is for survival. So
Right.
so you're essentially, fear is driven by the fact that you're not going to make it through this thing.
Right.
And so education is like, all right, how do I make it through this thing?
Yeah, and again, but it's also you're diffusing that power. Yes.
I also think taking action, so fear is a paralyzing state.
Yes.
And so if you can figure out, I think it's Brene Brown too, the next right thing.
The next right thing.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna do a tiny thing, it's gonna get me out of the paralysis, and then I'm gonna do the next tiny thing.
So the statement, I think it's really, really smart. Fear will paralyze. It will. It's one of those. It's fight or flight, right? Like it's just this paralyzing thing, right? Taking action and saying the next right thing is a great way to say it. Where just doing something helps kind of get your confidence up a little bit, right? It's just movement, just doing that one thing. It's really funny. There's a friend of mine who, he and I, we ride bikes sometimes, we work out together sometimes, and when we're not working out, that first workout feels really overwhelming. And I'll be like, hey dude, go for a walk. Like just do something to get yourself moving, because when you haven't worked out for a month or two, it's like, ugh, man, it feels really bad. So I'm going to summarize where we are right now, and then I think let's try to get with a few bumper sticker takeaways from today. So we've decided that fear is an omnipresent part of this job in some form or fashion. It can be positive as far as a driving force to try to make you achieve something in the world. It is, if it could be terrible too, if it's, because fear over things becomes anxiety, and you need to continue to cultivate your mental health. But specifically, the tactics we've talked about is listing, writing things down, getting it out of your brain. It's educating yourself. It's not letting yourself be frozen, taking that next single action. It's going and changing tacks. So as opposed to sitting in front of your computer and just staring at it, go and do something with your hands. Try to build something. Any other ones that we want to throw out as far as lists of things that we want to do? Try to deal with it. Yeah, Matthias.
Sure, geeky brain science about why all those things work.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
So the fear and the anxiety is all deep in our lizard brain and our amygdala,
Yeah, so fear and anxiety are in your amygdala.
Yeah, and so when you do these other activities that require higher level thinking and activity, you're actually increasing blood flow in your prefrontal cortex.
Oh, interesting.
And that is where reason, language, all these other mechanics of the human body live. And so by doing these actions, you're actually reducing blood flow in the amygdala, which is where all the into a higher order part of the brain that enables you to move past it using your other more human evolved skills.
I'm going to paraphrase poorly, but what happens when you do change tacts like that? You are moving blood flow, quite literally, from your amygdala, lizard brain, where all that fear and energy comes from, right, to your prefrontal cortex, which is the human part of your brain, which then, so it moves blood flow to your prefrontal cortex that allows you to actually start to make logical decisions. And there's a sense of, and this is now, I think, I can't remember if this one's been disproven, but the notion of an amygdala takeover is where your amygdala becomes, and it's hard to fire these other parts. So figuring out a way to get that prefrontal cortex moving. Super interesting. Okay, so we've got a few things, a few tactics, a few tools. Let's try to summarize as best as we can. So as founders, what is the advice that you're going to give a founder, and you guys will give a founder, on how to best deal with fear and not let fear become into anxiety? Like,
I would go with the Bob Newhart school of thought here and just stop it.
okay, fair enough. Just stop
If
it.
you don't know, there's a Saturday Night Live skit with Bob Newhart where he plays a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
And a woman sits down in front of him and she starts to talk about the bad things that he's doing. He's like, just stop it.
Just stop. these behavior patterns.
Just stop it.
Yeah, you should just stop
And he's
doing
like, it worked. It totally worked. He's a genius.
that. Okay,
Sorry.
so stop it. So stop being scared. You guys just list that as the best.
That's terrible advice. But yeah, I mean, break your fears down into smaller parts. Take the first right step, which I love that. I love that piece of it. Start to learn. Start to understand. Because you're afraid because you don't know something, go learn it. What else did we?
I think the only other advice, and then I want you guys to weigh in too, is to note it. Is when things start happening where it really comes up, you don't have to judge it. You don't have to be like, oh, this is terrible and this is fucking awful because I'm so scared right now and I'm in this thing, because that just increases it. But if you just be like, whew, I got a lot of fear present right now. Yeah, please.
Don't struggle alone. So
Don't struggle alone.
Who are your people? Who can you talk to? Like,
Surround yourself with other founders.
I'm gonna just give you a little.
Pro founder.
Maybe a founder board.
Yeah,
I don't know. Right? Like, so maybe you go into a founder board, because the whole idea and the reason why we've created founder boards is specifically around the notion that when you're a founder, you really do feel alone. You can't often talk to your spouse, your employees, other stakeholders in your business. You can't go to your key customers and be like, yeah, we're fucked. Like, that's not a good idea, right? But other founders are people that typically get it. Like, they're just people that understand.
I want to circle back to something you said, Chris, which I think is, you kind of glossed over it, that I think is really important, and that is recognize, like, take a beat and recognize the feeling. So you can do this with sadness. You can, like, give yourself, say, all right, I'm going to feel sad for the next 6 hours. Or I'm going to, I feel afraid. Feel it. Like, let yourself feel it. Acknowledge it. And anger, same thing. Like, let yourself feel angry for a little bit. Acknowledge it. Give your time box it. Say, all right, and then after this, after I feel it, I'm gonna move on to actually something that's productive. I
mostly agree with you. Mostly about naming. I think time boxing would be a little bit dangerous, because if it's like, so I grew up in Texas, and in Texas,
time box it from. I mean, time box it from before you, like. It's okay to not take action right away and just feel it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. The reason why I say that time boxing, and just to make super clear, is like, in Texas, we had this thing where it's like, look, you can feel for 15 minutes and then get back on your fucking horse, all right? Like, it was, there was no,
There's
like...
something about
Yeah,
cowboys
it's like,
that are
well,
right
my grandmother just died. I'm kind of sad. Like, we're not going to sit around and feel sorry for ourselves, right? Like, it's like, allow whatever feelings that you have to run their course.
Yeah.
But But I do appreciate the fact of just naming it. Yeah, Matthias.
I think you named it, Anthony, but I was just gonna say what's helped me make connections with others around this is just giving yourself permission. And I think that's what you're getting to, is like, whether it's a time box or whatever tactic you use, it's just allowing yourself to know that the things I'm experiencing are totally okay, that like that's normal, and that I think we fight. If we don't have that permission, we tend to fight and say what's happening to me right now isn't allowed or is bad, and we start to get in that lizard brain spiral.
Yeah, you make judgment on the things that you're feeling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like giving yourself permission to be in whatever part of that experience you're in is an unlocking belief system.
So Matthias is saying that leadership instructor and now neuroscience professor at DU. So the idea is giving yourself permission to feel those feelings, because if you sit with those in judgment, then you can make it worse, right? There's one other piece here, and let's just name it as kind of the counterpoint to this, which is there is still, even though that we're all doing a better job of explaining what this journey is really like, it's like what we do twice a week and this and other things throughout Denver Startup Week, we try to sit up and say, hey, this is the real journey, and the journey is going to be ups and downs and struggles, and everything that you see, like, it's the common narrative that you see about being a startup is brilliant idea, still to this day, brilliant person but misunderstood, comes up with the killer idea. Zuckerberg comes up with the idea for a social network, right? He's a misfit. He doesn't like school at Harvard. Brilliant person, brilliant idea. Few things happen in between, billionaire. Right?
Question mark.
And that is still the dominant narrative outside of these rooms, right? In these rooms, we talk about the real shit. We talk about there is no easy path. Everything that you see as far as up and to the right looks like, up and down, and there are good days and there are bad days, and there's days that you think you're going to go bankrupt, and there's days you think you're going to be a billionaire. Like, that's part of the path. But you can't buy into that bullshit narrative, because then the first time that you really, really start to suffer and you start to struggle and it's really fucking scary, you're going to be like, well, clearly I'm doing it wrong, because these guys just, were brilliant and then they ended up just perfect. I will tell you.
Zuckerberg, the primal emotion that drove Zuckerberg was not fear.
Oh, no, we're not going to go into the whole like we're
It
going
was
to get laid thing.
it was procreation.
Oh God. Okay. So the reality is that if you talk to, and I don't know. I mean, I've listened to a lot of entrepreneurs speak down through the years, and they don't have that narrative. They will talk about. Famously, I just heard the guy from NVIDIA. The CEO of NVIDIA is fucking amazing. I'll get it in 2 seconds. Sorry, he's going to be in our podcast, and no, it's not. But Jensen is the CEO. It's like, NVIDIA is the most valuable company in the world right now. And when asked what he would do differently if he could go back and do it again, he said he wouldn't do it because it was too hard. This is like, dude's a billionaire now, right? He's the founder of NVIDIA. The most valuable company in the world.
The most honest answer, the most humble answer I've ever heard.
He's an incredible
Yeah,
CEO.
that's an unbelievable answer.
All right. I think that's probably about it. It's a good place to. Any final words, Anthony or audience?
One more.
Yeah, please.
I just wanted to go back to what was touched on about sort of the mental toughness, like allowing yourself to feel that emotion of like, this sucks, whatever. And I think of this interview earlier this year, Novak Djokovic, arguably the best tennis player ever. And the interviewer said, I think your greatest strength is mental toughness. And he said, no, let me correct you. That's not something I was born with. That's something I've worked on. And he said, the best tennis players allow themselves to go into that moment because we're human. Oh, I just screwed up that shot. Oh, I just lost that set. But how quickly you go from living in that moment to coming back into, I've got to get on with the next point.
Yeah.
So, and he's trained himself to do that. And I think of that as entrepreneurs, like, we can go into that moment and say, oh, I just lost this deal. But how quickly can I go from living in that to pulling myself back and doing that over and over and over again?
I'll summarize quickly just because I think it's such a great point. Novak Djokovic said in an interview, hey, people admire your mental toughness. And he says, hey, I wasn't born with that mental toughness. I had to cultivate it throughout time. And it's about being in the moment and feeling the things, but then being able to move past that to be in the next moment.
One more comment, and then we're going to wrap up.
I just want to say thank you. This is like the universe needed me to be sitting here and hearing this. And I
That's
know
amazing.
So many people need that, and I appreciate you so much for this honest conversation.
Yeah, I think it's so they was thanking us for having the honest conversation. These are the conversations that we need to have because we sit in this space where people say you need to be a brilliant but misunderstood person with a big idea and then do some things and you'll be a billionaire. And that's not at all true. It's not true for the people we're using Zuck as an example. It's not true he suffered plenty. But also, we in this space, we should be honest about it. And the big joke, so early on in Denver Startup Week, I guess year 2 or 3, a guy named Dave McClure, who's turned out to be kind of a creepy guy, but Dave McClure tweeted he's a Denver startup scene, and it was a rainbow farting unicorns. He's like, because we're just
A rainbow,
a
unicorn farting rainbows.
Yeah, because it's just like,
I'd like to
it's
see the other
all,
one, though.
it's all, that would be interesting. It's all like this narrative, like, oh, everything's perfect, it's great, it's wonderful, it's amazing, it's exciting, right? And the reality is that's not true. So thank you for that comment, appreciate it, and subscribe to How to Founder because we make fun of each other and talk about real shit all the time. I think that's about it. Anthony, what do we have the rest of the week? Denver Startup Week is
Denver Startup Week. We're still in the middle of Denver Startup Week. So we have 2 more How to Founder podcasts. So for those of you following us on LinkedIn, follow our LinkedIn page, linkedin.com/company/howtofounder, or follow us on YouTube at How to Founder on our channel. Tomorrow, How to Founder, we are talking about advice discernment, which sounds boring, but it's actually going to be a great conversation.
Important.
And then hopefully on Thursday, we'll come back to what we were supposed to be talking about today, which is the basics of accounting.
I mean, that's even more exciting than advice.
We're going to get deep into retained earnings and what those mean.
Oh, that's sexy. That's pretty sexy.
And then also, today we have a lot of events going on. And then Thursday, 2 events that you have to join us for. 10 a.m. at the Commons on Champa is a raw live pitch event called Startup Garage.
Gotta
that's
pitch.
That's going to be a blast. Idea stage, no decks, 3 minutes, go. And then at noon, right back here at the CU campus, you and I are going to pitch bullshit decks. We're gonna have 2 decks, and we're going to talk about creating a good investor deck, and we're going to use ridiculous examples to do it.
Can we talk about topics? I think because I've already been teasing them. I pitch meat water, which is protein-laden water.
And I talk about how to avoid family tragedy with 3D printers.
That's great. All right, that's it. Thank you, guys. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate that. And thank you for joining us online. We'll see you again tomorrow, really, for How to Founder.
How to Founder.
All right.
See you guys.
You.